Hello and welcome back to another Halloween special. In this episode I'm gonna review Waxworks for the Commodore Amiga. Waxworks is a horror adventure game with role-playing elements. The game was developed by a company called Horrorsoft and it was published by a company called Accolade. The game was released in the year 1992 for the Commodore Amiga and the PC-DOS. This is the German version of the game, so all the in-game footage will be in the German language. In Waxworks, your task is you have to finish the work of your uncle Boris, and you try to lift a curse which is on your family for over 600 years. All his life, Uncle Boris was obsessed with evil itself. Dark forces, magic, mass murders and torture devices were all parts of his research and fascination. He even converted his old mansion in Vista Forge into a wax museum, dedicated to evil, showing murders, zombies and other monsters in his exhibit. Because of his work and his obsession, everybody, including your parents, tried to avoid him and his wax museum as much as possible, or as good as possible. And some people might have said that he had something to do with the disappearing of your twin brother Alex when you were a teenager, which happened while you and Alex were exploring one of the many natural tunnels and caves underneath Vista Forge, your birthplace. The police and some volunteers spent over a week searching the complete tunnel system and the connected old ore mine without finding any traces of Alex at all. After the incident, your parents sold their house and moved far away with you because they were worried that someday you might also disappear in those tunnels as well. Uncle Boris came a few years later for a visit, and during dinner he gradually shifted the conversation to the family history. Even though your mother tried to change the subject, Uncle Boris insisted on telling the story, the legend, of Ixona, a dark family secret from centuries past. During the Dark Ages, one of your ancestors was a farmer, and he and his wife lived in Walachei, Romania. One day he caught an old gypsy woman trying to steal one of his chickens, and since it were the barbaric Dark Ages, as punishment he cut off her right hand. Laying in the dirt of the farmyard, she drew a crystal ball from beneath her blood-caked cloth and set it in the dust before her. Because what he didn't know at that time was that she was a witch called Ixona. Staring into the crystal ball, she said,
"In every family there is storm and evil waiting to be awoken. For spilling my blood I shall call forth an ancient curse to poison yours. 2,000 years ago, one of your Egyptian ancestors had twin boys. One was good, but the other was cursed by an evil pharaoh and turned into a monster. I call upon the curse of the pharaoh to return. Once more in every generation in which a family bears twins, one shall belong to Beelzebub."
Your ancestor tried to smash the crystal ball with his axe, but the witch whirled out of reach and quickly fled into the safety of a nearby dark forest. As it would turn out, the curse was a lot more than just hot air, and the first victims would be his children, because his wife was currently pregnant with twins. Soon afterwards she gave birth to 2 sons. One, Druek, grew up to be a decent, hard-working farmer, but the other one, Vladimir, was corrupt and lusted only after money and power. When the curse took hold of him, it was said that his feet became cloven and he was forced to wear special boots in order to walk. When he was an adult, Vladimir gathered all the miscreants of the province and started pillaging all the neighboring villages, and with time he was able to build a huge army of ruthless mercenaries, and in 1448 he seized the throne of Walachei and instituted a reign of terror as Vlad IV. One of his first acts as prince was to send out his army and find Ixona. Very soon she was captured and thrown into the dungeon and repeatedly tortured, but she refused to lift the curse no matter what they did to her. Infuriated, Vlad had her impaled on a stake driven to the bottom of a swamp outside his walls. The 2 days it took the old witch to die, the swamp's snakes and snapping turtles stripped the living flesh of her body bite by small bite. In the following years, Vlad continued his reign of terror. All his enemies were tortured to death and impaled at the border of his kingdom, and he would go down in history as Vlad the Impaler, one of the bloodiest tyrants who ever ruled on Earth. Ixona's curse persisted down the centuries. Whenever twins were born into your family, one of the twins would took to evil ways. It was said that one evil twin was the head torturer during the Spanish Inquisition, another one was rumored to be the Marquis de Sade, and one female twin was burned at the stake during the Salem witch trials. When Uncle Boris finished his story, your mother looked at you and paled. Even with Alex gone, you too were a twin. Uncle Boris noticed her look, and he reached across the table to pat her hand reassuringly. "You don't have to worry, because I found a way to lift the curse forever," he said. Uncle Boris leaned back in his chair and started to explain that all his life, all the obsession that he had with evil and building the Wax Museum was only to fully understand the sinister forces and to find a way to lift the curse of Ixona. And it worked. One night in his Wax Museum he had a vision of the swamp, Ixona's final resting place. He'd flown to Valachai, and within days he was able to locate the swamp nearby the northern wall of a ruined castle. After he hired some workers to drain the marsh, he found the remains of Ixona. Around her neck was a chain with a small metal box, and in the metal box was the crystal ball with which she cursed the family for over 600 years ago. Since then he was studying the crystal ball to reveal its secrets. It's a very slow process and it might take years, but he promised to find a way to lift the curse forever. And this was the last time that you saw your Uncle Boris alive. Now, a few years later, Uncle Boris has passed away and he left you all his belongings, including the Wax Museum and the last letter. In the letter he tells you that your brother Alex is still alive and he lives in the tunnels underneath Vista Forge. The day he went missing, the curse took hold of his mind, and with the following years he acquired some terrible powers which a sane mind can't imagine. His unholy mission is to resurrect evil beings who have murdered and tortured throughout history. Now you are the only person who can stop him and save many innocent lives. If you succeed, not only are you able to lift the curse from your family forever, you might also save Alex as well. Be prepared for a journey of the supernatural, a trip back through time. It's not going to be easy and it will be dangerous, but I know you're gonna succeed and I will help you as much as I can on your journey. Now go to the Wax Museum for further instructions, and that's the starting point of the game. After reaching the Wax Museum, you'll be welcomed by your uncle's servant. Typical for good employee, he first asks you for your ID/password before you can enter the museum. Afterwards he gives you, as instructed by your uncle, Ixona's crystal ball, and you can hardly believe your eyes. Uncle Boris appears in it and talks to you from beyond the grave. He explains to you that in order to lift the curse you have to enter 4 enchanted exhibits of his museum and travel back in time to defeat the evil twins of your ancestors. Each exhibit belongs to a different time period and was carefully chosen by your uncle. A plaque in front of each exhibit will give you a short summary of the evil twin and what is going to await you. The 4 places that you have to travel to are a pyramid in ancient Egypt, a graveyard, time and place is unknown, but I guess it's somewhere around the 18th century, London in the year 1888, and an abandoned mine, again time and place unknown, but I guess somewhere around the 1970s. You can enter the exhibit in no particular order, but you can only leave them if you are successful. Thanks to the crystal ball, Uncle Boris will be always at your side, and if needed he will give you helpful advices or some magical support like healing your character if possible. But talking to the dead has its price, and it will drain your psychic powers. On the top middle you have your main game screen, which is basically the first person perspective of your character, and this is where all the action happens. Underneath is the inventory, which shows you either your own inventory with all the items that you currently have, or the content of another item, like a bag, a vase or a chest for instance. On the bottom you can see your hit points, the current level of your character, the experience points and the psychic power points. You get experience points for solving riddles, fighting enemies and basically for every step, as long as you haven't stepped on this field before, so backtracking will not increase your experience points. Of course, with time, when you've reached a certain amount of experience points, your character will level up, which will increase and restore some of your hit points and psychic powers. On the left side you see a representation of what your character looks like, then below you have your movement controls, forwards, backwards, turn left or right and turn around, plus going up or down. Now if you want you can also move with your character by using the arrow keys on your keyboard or with the cursor on the main game screen. Underneath we have a sculpture of a warrior and the box below it shows you how much damage you made on an enemy. On the bottom right side is a sculpture of a demon and the box below it shows you how much damage an enemy makes on you. Above the sculpture you have the options to either pause the game or to save, load or exit the game. The box above is reserved for all the interactions with items and the peoples that you actually can talk with in the game. And on the top right you have another 6 functions / options. The first one will bring up again your inventory in the inventory screen. With the second one you can switch between the normal movement controls and a compass, which can be very helpful, especially in some specific levels. The third one switches your cursor to a hand symbol, which allows you to pick up items. But you actually don't need this function every time you want to pick up an item. Just point the cursor on the item that you want to pick up, then push the left mouse button until the cursor changes to the hand symbol and then drag the hand to the inventory and release the mouse button. The fourth one shows you all the currently available weapons that you have. Then the fifth one activates the crystal ball and lets you talk with your Uncle Boris, and the last one activates the combat mode. In the combat mode the cursor switches to a sword and your character will draw his weapon, if you have one and if you have selected one, since every new or better weapon that you have collected must be first equipped in order to use it, otherwise you will always fight with your fists. During a fight you can either attack the left hand, right hand, chest or head of your enemy. A combination of all 4 is mostly the best strategy to defeat an enemy in a short time, and except for one specific enemy you can only attack and never dodge or parry any of your opponent's attacks. Ranged weapons can't be equipped, at least not for the combat mode, and in order to use them you have to click on them and whenever you are ready to fire, click the use icon on the right side of the screen. As soon as you have defeated the evil twin of the exhibit, you will be teleported back to the museum. But everything that you have collected or earned so far will stay in the exhibit, including experience points and character levels. So basically your character will be resetted every time you finish an exhibit, and then you have to continue with another one. But don't forget, time is money and nobody gets younger. So to make sure that you don't dawdle around, your uncle's servant is instructed to help you focusing and literally give you a push in the right direction. Now he won't hurt you, but he does look scary, so I would not try to make him angry. After you have beaten the fourth and last exhibit, the servant will hand you 4 relics. Each relic belongs to one of your evil ancestors, which you just have defeated. Uncle Boris will explain to you that he couldn't give you the relics before because the original possessed great magical powers, and there was a chance that you could fall victim to them and also become evil because of their previous owners. But by defeating them you have dispelled that evil, leaving only the original powers intact. Now you have to enter the final exhibit and travel back in time to prevent Ixona from placing the curse on your family. And you have to use the relics exactly as he instructs you to do, or otherwise Alex and your entire family will be lost forever. There are no difficulty settings in Waxworks, but overall I would say the difficulty level of the game is somewhere between medium and hard, and it varies actually depending on the stage / the exhibit. Without including the final exhibit, the graveyard is the easiest of them all. It has the smallest level size, only a few puzzles and a lot of fights, but against weak enemies. The mine is a lot harder. It has a bigger level size, a lot more puzzles and also a lot of fights against strong enemies. Plus some of the plants are death traps and it can be hard to see them, so you have to be extra careful. But I also have to say, with the right weapon, the enemies in this exhibit are actually no threat at all. The pyramid is slightly harder than the mine. It has the biggest level size, many riddles and also traps that you need to avoid, and a lot of fights as well against stronger enemies. London is definitely the hardest of them all, at least in my opinion. The level size is about the same size as the mine. There are many puzzles to solve, and except for the fight with Jack the Ripper, no other fights, but you'll be constantly chased by the police and blood-hungry mobs, which makes it really hard to navigate through the streets of London and finishing your task on top of that. Waxworks is also one of those games where you either have to find somewhere all the maps of the stages or you draw them yourself, because it is very easy to get lost in the stages. Control-wise, you can either play the game with mouse only or keyboard and mouse, which both works flawlessly. The music has a good quality and creates an eerily beautiful atmosphere. The sound effects I would say are more average but still okay, and graphically, yeah, there is definitely nothing to complain about. Typical for Horrorsoft games are all the many ways that your character can bite the dust, including a detailed picture of the corpse. And also in Waxworks there is no shortage of that as well. In my opinion, Waxworks is an amazing horror adventure game with beautiful graphics and really beautiful soundtrack, and it also has a great, sometimes spooky atmosphere. It's a perfect game for Halloween, and I would recommend it to every video gamer who likes adventure games and horror games in general, and I would also recommend it, of course, to every video game collector. A few words about the PC version. Now, for the most part, both versions are identical. The only differences that I know of are that in the PC version, some of the stages have a different music / soundtrack, and you have a couple more animations in the PC version. I could also say that the PC version runs smoother and the loading times are faster, but this would only count if you don't install the Amiga version onto a hard disk, which I haven't done. I have a hard disk, but I never used it. And even if you play the game only with the floppy disks, the loading times are actually not that long. And one other thing that I want to mention is that Horrorsoft did an amazing job in terms of dividing the game data onto the 10 floppy disks which this game has. And what this means is that at least during the stages you hardly have to change any disks at all, so you can play a long period of time before you actually have to change a disk. And this is something that not many video game developers back then actually cared about. So again, Horrorsoft, amazing job. Yeah, we're almost at the end of this review. Two things are left that I also wanted to mention in this review. Number one, there's also another game called Waxworks, which was released in 1983. It was a text adventure game for Commodore 64, ZX Spectrum, Econ Electron, and I guess for some other computer systems as well. Both games don't have a lot in common, and this is also not the sequel, so this was the thing that I wanted to mention. And there are at least 3 movies with the same title, and none of those movies are, or other way around, the game is not based on any of those movies. But I think that the developers from Horrorsoft were actually influenced by the second movie that I know of, Waxworks from 1988, and yeah, I guess they watched the movie and afterwards they came up with the idea. There's also a sequel, Waxworks 2, Lost in Time, the sequel of this one, which I haven't watched, but I will be watching it in the future. But Waxworks from 1988, a horror comedy, is a pretty cool movie, but in the end, yeah, the game is not based on any of those 3 movies. The third movie that I know of is, I guess it's a German black and white silent movie from 1924, which I actually watched on YouTube, and you can find it also there. But in the end, yeah, we are now at the end of my review of Waxworks for the Commodore Amiga, a perfect game for Halloween, which I would strongly recommend to you that you check out. I really hope you enjoyed the show. Maybe see you next time. Take care, bye, and happy Halloween.